Greetings, everyone. It's good to see all of you again. On behalf of the Crop Trust and the CGIAR Genebank Initiative, thank you for joining today's GROW webinar. I'm Yanni Van Beem, and with me is Peter Poser, who is co-moderator for this presentation. Before we begin, please note that comments or questions for the presenter can be placed in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. Should our Zoom connection fail, you can immediately receive a new email message. Please click on that link to rejoin the webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Peter Wenzl, leader of the Genetic Resource Program at Alliance Bioversity International and CGIAR since 2016. He came to CGIAR from the Global Crop Diversity Trust, where he contributed to the coordination of the DivSeek initiative. Previously, he led the Seeds of Discovery project at CIMMYT, to systematically identify and mobilize useful genetic variation from the global maize and wheat collections using a combination of genotyping, phenotyping, and pre-breeding strategies. Peter has a PhD in plant physiology and genetics from the University of Vienna and has participated in a variety of research areas devoted to the development of tools to enhance the conservation and use of plant genetic resources. The title of his presentation is What It Takes to Build an Eco-Efficient Gene Bank for the 21st Century, Experiences and Lessons Learned. Welcome, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Gianni. It's great to connect again. And let me just share my screen. I hope you can see my screen. Can you confirm?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We can't see your screen, we can see you. Yeah.
But you can see my presentation,
yes,
right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, good, okay. So yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity to share our journey over the last, how many years? Well, it started really in 2013, 14. I wasn't around at the beginning. I joined, as you mentioned, in 2016, and it has been quite a journey, and I'm going to walk you through all the ups and downs of this journey and where we are today. So as you can see here, it's quite a team, it has been a team effort, and I'm going to mention everyone involved at the very end. So here's a brief overview of the presentation. I'm going to start off by talking about the original motivation and the goals of why completely rebuild the gene bank as opposed to renovating the current building. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit about fundraising efforts and choosing the architects and designing the facility, which was quite labor intensive. Then the period of construction leading up to the inauguration earlier this year. Then I'm going to take you through a sort of virtual tour through the facilities. I'm going to briefly mention ongoing efforts to move the laboratories and particularly the germplasm collections, and then end up with 3 or 4 slides on experiences and lessons learned and what perhaps I would be doing or suggesting to do different next time when we build the next gene bank in another 40, 50, 60 years, I don't know. And end up by talking about a little bit of a future outlook. Now, the current building, it's still current building because the germplasm collections haven't moved actually yet. And the current building was originally constructed as a meat quality lab attached to a slaughterhouse to serve the CGIAR's tropical pastures program. It wasn't pastures program at the time. It also included the animal component. But very soon after its construction, it was decided for CGIAR at the time would only focus on plants, and the building became available and was eventually repurposed to be a gene bank. So for that reason, the spaces, the layout wasn't really ever designed to support gene banking workflows. In 2013, CGIAR concluded that the renovation would be quite expensive, and we would be renovating a dysfunctional building essentially. So that's the reason why a decision was taken in 2013 to completely rebuild the gene bank based on these 3 guiding principles. It had to be a functional building, it had to be an environmentally sustainable building, and it should also be an open building, open to the general public, and an iconic building so that it becomes easily recognizable, similar to this Svalbard seed vault amongst the general public as a symbol for the vital importance of genetic resources for food security. So in terms of the functional dimension, we obviously we were going to focus on staff and the collection safety. So ensuring staff safety during work, the work conditions, and the collections, they need to be safe. We need to take all measures to ensure that. The Genebank should, of course, support the highest quality standards in terms of QMS, implementation of QMS system, and also emphasize the growing importance of the digital dimension of genetic resources, DSI, and all this, what's going on at the moment. It should be environmentally sound, but also be within budget. So it should be sustainable from an environmental point of view, but also from a financial point of view. And as I mentioned before, it should be open. It should be able to attract outside visitors and also support the training of the next generation of genetic resource scientists. So in terms of functionality, these are some of the considerations that went into design originally. There are very rare flooding events on CGIAR campus. So we said the Genebank should be elevated at an elevated floor, at least 1.5 meters above the soil level. It should have lightning protection. There are earthquakes, of course, Andes, lots of earthquakes in the region. So no second floor, just a single floor. So to minimize the risk that the second floor crushes the first floor where the collections are, for example. Appropriate emergency exits, fire protection, smoke detectors, emergency exits, sprinklers, etc. And access security in terms of electronic or e-cards and also video cameras installed. Another consideration was to enable the herbarium to be cooled down to -20 degrees every few months to avoid any problems with insects feeding on the herbarium specimens. In terms of staff and also visitors, all the usual measures taken in good quality labs in terms of ensuring staff safety when working with chemicals. And there was also consideration of trying to design a space where staff from different Genebank areas could regularly meet, interact, and just creating a meeting space where interesting discussions can take place and collaborations can be formed. It should be also supporting visitors who are disabled in terms of having appropriate facilities, ramps, and toilets, and it should have a dedicated module, digital Genebank module focusing on adding new data, useful, actionable data to the germplasm collections, genomics, phenomics, etc. Now, in terms of environmental sustainability, there was a clear call to reduce essentially electricity consumption, mostly by air conditioning and also, of course, cooling the cold rooms down. So there was an idea to reduce the solar radiation that hits the actual buildings where the collections are being stored. Wherever possible, we should use natural light as much as possible to reduce lighting requirements. Cold rooms should be appropriately insulated, of course. And very early on, there was already a plan to link up the building to an array of solar panels to produce renewable energy to the extent possible. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on. In terms of water, the idea was to make the building completely independent of external water supply by using rainwater, and the surrounding gardens of the building should be planted with native species that don't require any extra irrigation. And considering all these sustainability, demands, there was a call to get 2 types of environmental certifications for the building. The first one is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED. It's a very common green building standard in the US. The other one is Living Building Challenge certification. That one is more demanding, and we ended up not really pursuing it to the very end, but I'm going to mention briefly later on what we did and what we couldn't do in terms of Living Building Challenge. And finally, the building should be open to the general public. There should be areas for visitors, ideally big windows so visitors can walk by and look into the laboratories to see what's going on. There should be a little exhibition about the conservation and importance of genetic resources. And again, it should be an iconic building. That was always one of the items on the table. And it should be providing a platform for capacity building, for visiting scientists, for students coming and doing their thesis, for people, for scientists who want to come and join here for some time for sabbatical visits. Now, in 2014, CGIAR approached an architect in the US who was interested in the project, but he ended up designing the headquarters of Google in the US, so he wasn't available, which led to a rethinking of the approach. And it was decided, let's better do a private tender within Colombia, because we found really out, we knew that there are lots of architects, very creative architects in the country. And we did a private tender, and here you can see the proposals from the two finalists for the design. And at the end, we selected this group of architects. They're called AIV Arquitectos. They are a group of architects in Medellin who designed this science museum you can see here. It's called Parque Explora. It's a beautiful science museum. It's very nice for kids and very, very creative building, both from the overall design and also the exhibitions inside. Now, once having selected the architects, there was a phase between more or less 2015 and 2017 where we did two things in parallel. Of course, fundraising. That was the big thing. And I got involved in 2016 in those fundraising efforts as well. And in parallel, we worked with the architects to design the building. There was an initial phase of design where we went in very optimistically, and we ended up with a facility that was beyond a possible budget envelope. And then when I arrived, one of the tasks was to shrink the facility to be within the budget envelope that we thought we could fundraise for. And actually, you can see here the fundraising efforts, they didn't stop in 2017, unfortunately, it wasn't possible. They went on to even basically to 2022, because fundraising was a big challenge. As you can see here, the total budget envelope was $17.2 million. And in all these years, we managed to fundraise 6.2 of the $17.2 million. And the rest, the $11 million rest was basically put in by institutional reserves. The big challenge really has been to seek funding not for research projects. Many donors are set up to provide funding for research projects, but for infrastructure and for expensive infrastructure that's not easy to fund, particularly given that we're located in Latin America and not in Africa, because most of the funding focuses these days on Africa and not Latin America. So here you can see those who contributed. The biggest contributor, $3 million, was the Colombian government, and other institutions, other funders also contributed. Now, in parallel to these fundraising efforts, we worked on the design of the new building. And again, taking into account these three-dimensional, functional, sustainable, and open, and an iconic building. The architects here on the right side, in the center of this graph, you can see the architects who were coordinating, of course, the design, but it involved several different contributors. Of course, we in the Genebank, we contributed all, focusing mostly on the functional aspects of the building. There were technical design specialists who were hired by the architects, who were providing very specialized design for, say, air conditioning or all the automation required in the building, etc., etc. And because we were going after these environmentally sustainable standards, we hired some green building consultant group who advised the architects what kind of measures had to be taken into account to ensure that the eventual building will be able to qualify for these environmental standards. And we also worked with a group called Green Loop, because they are specialists in seeking these environmentally sustainable certifications. So they're very good in terms of helping us or helping the architects to decide which kind of measures should be prioritized to be able at the end to successfully apply for these certifications. So we went through a large number of iterations with the architects to ensure that the overall layout of the different components of the building is aligned with workflows. Overall, the building is designed in a modular fashion. The idea is that each module is built around a workflow in a particular Genebank area, such as in vitro conservation or seed conservation. That was possible for all modules except the central big one you can see here. You can see lots of adjustments. There we had to make a compromise because of budget constraints. We squeezed together several different areas into a single module just to save some funds. And the design also involved a long string of interactions with the architects and the technical designers for each of the, in total, more than 100 rooms in the whole facility. So for each of these rooms, we had to specify the requirements in terms of the temperature and humidity in the area, the number of staff working in the area, what kind of equipment would be put into, would be operating in these areas, the pressure, differential pressure levels in different areas had to be adjusted to avoid, for example, contamination or dust moving from the threshing area into the seed cleaning area, things like that. The sterility level, particularly important, of course, in the in vitro area, where we needed fume and laminar flow hoods positioned, the type of furniture, laboratory furniture required in the particular area, phone connections, LAN, Wi-Fi, and we also had to provide a list of individual reagents used in each of these areas and the type of waste produced in each of these more than 100 rooms. So that was a huge exercise, and quite a number of Genebank staff got very busy and contributed to filling these tables. There was another string or set of tables we had to provide information for, basically to determine the thermal load so that designers could right size the air conditioning, the power of the air conditioning equipment in different areas. And to do that, we had to estimate the time of each staff working in each room, each day of the week for all the areas. We had to list the power consumed by each of the pieces of equipment in each of the areas, the numbers of hours the equipment is used every day of the week, and the frequency with which individual doors are being opened between areas. That all this had to be taken into account to right size the air conditioning equipment for all these areas. And then we also had some additional tenders to design, to custom build essentially all the shelving systems. The shelving systems in the cold rooms, 5 cold rooms in total, the drying rooms, the herbarium, then all the in vitro growth rooms, and also several storage rooms in the basement to store all sorts of items in the basement. And there was another round, another private tender to actually 2 different ones, furniture for offices and the furniture for laboratories. And of course, the furniture for the laboratories had to be custom built as well to adapt to the particular spaces available in the laboratories. Now, moving on to the sustainability dimension. Here, I'm going to talk about the LEED design, the leadership in energy and environmental design, which was really, the main environmental certification that we were going after. This is a very common design. There are several very common certification for environmentally friendly designs. There are several types of LEED certifications, and the one we chose, of course, is the one for building new buildings. It's called Building Design and Construction, version 4. That's the most recent version, and that's essentially a certification that's being granted at the US Green Building Council. How it works, there are several dimensions or components that contribute individual points to the overall score, like water efficiency. The most important one are really water efficiency, the energy and atmosphere, so electricity consumption mostly, materials, the kind of materials that are being used to construct the building, and the environmental quality for staff inside the building. There are several others as well, but they don't contribute so many points to the overall score. And depending on the overall score that the building can achieve, you get a silver, up to platinum level certification. We believe, and we're in the process at the moment, we believe the building will get platinum certification. Just briefly walking through some of the measures that were taken to collect points for this LEED certification. In terms of energy, we try to connect the building to as much renewable energy as possible. I'm going to mention that in a moment. Only LED lights were used, and also there's a lightning control system that detects the presence of staff in a particular area, switches on the light, and then switches it off automatically if there's no one there anymore, just to reduce overall consumption. A big component is that the various individual buildings that comprise the Genebank are covered by a big canopy building, and that has actually two functions. The most important function is to reduce energy consumption for air conditioning by reducing solar irradiation hitting the roofs of the individual buildings. Also, the air conditioning systems, it wasn't, there had to be machinery used that is particularly energy efficient, and of course, without CFCs, not working with CFCs. As I mentioned, the canopy reduces solar irradiation, but it's also simultaneously used to catch rainwater. So all the water that is being consumed in the building by the building is actually from this rainwater being caught by the canopy building. It's being stored in on-site underground water tank, and an estimate is up to 4,200 cubic meter per year of water can be caught using typical precipitation in the area, which is more than sufficient to supply the water in the building that the building needs. The black and gray waters are generated by the building are treated and filtered on site to essentially create a closed hydrological circles on the building site. So the building plus the surrounding gardens. There are also water efficient toilets, showers, and taps that switch on automatically and don't use a lot of water. And again, as I mentioned before, the surrounding gardens, they are all grown with native species that don't require irrigation. In terms of materials and resources, for example, there are very clear rules of what kind of materials can be used and can't be used. For example, in terms of wood, only Forest Stewardship Council certified wood can be used. There was only a single supplier in Colombia that was a big bottleneck actually at one point during the construction. We couldn't use any paint or adhesive or sealants with lots of volatile organic compounds, and the materials that are in contact with water in the building had to be free of ingredients, specific ingredients listed in the so-called red list of building materials. That are materials or ingredients that are harmful to health. More than 90% of the waste generated during the construction had to be recycled or reused on site. So for example, we reuse wood packaging materials of cryo tanks to contribute to a wooden floor in one of the sites in the building. And there had to be a dedicated waste storage and separation room, which is in the basement. In terms of air quality, there had to be good filter system in terms of air renewals from the air conditioning system. That's of course very important in the metro area in particular, which is all filtered through HEPAs, but also the other areas have quite good filters to ensure clean air within laboratories. And we of course needed a monitoring system, not only for temperature, but also for CO2 that feeds into the sort of human health and well-being component of the LEED certification. And there's no smoking allowed inside or outside the building. So these are the main features addressed by the LEED certification. The living building challenge I mentioned before is more challenging. It has 7, they call it petals: place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. And we ended up only being able to address 4 out of the 7 because the others would have been logistically and financially too demanding. So I'm not going to put much emphasis on this particular certification because our main focus really is now on getting the LED platinum certification approved, which is in process. And finally, the open and iconic nature of the building was one of the important components as well, as I mentioned before. And it was really inspired by the canopy of the native forest in the region where we are located. There are these big trees, the samanes, they're called samanes, and they have these huge canopies under which you have a second layer of canopies of smaller trees and species growing. And in a way, we designed, or the architects designed the building in a similar way, sort of two-layered forest canopy kind of design. Now, moving on to the construction. The construction was started in October 2018. It was a long process. It lasted a little bit more than 3 years. It would have lasted less if there hadn't been COVID interrupting, of course, and affecting construction. The construction was overseen by an oversight committee that was composed of 2 science members, myself and Joe Tome, who is leading the organizational unit in which the Genebank is operating. And the legal office was part of that, finance, operations, procurement, the fundraising equipment, a regional representative, and the secretary taking all the notes. And our role was to basically provide oversights in all of these different areas and coordinate, and that was very important, coordinate between the legal, the financial, the technical aspects. We met more or less 70 times during the construction phase, so it was quite intense. And we, of course, had different detailed meeting minutes for the auditors. We actually were audited through an external auditor that include the whole construction process, the decisions taken, and also very detailed plan for moving the collections. I had to elaborate. In 2020, of course, with COVID, it's initially, at least the first few months, the construction completely stopped, but then was reinitiated after putting in place a series of preventive health measures to ensure staff safety. And but it was slowed down during that phase. Definitely, there's no doubt. In 2021, that was like the first photo where the building looked almost already complete. It's quite a large building, as you can see here. It's a total of almost 7,000 square meters of construction that includes the main level of the building and also the basement. Now, one of the components is renewable energy, as I mentioned before. That's very important for LED certification. The original plan was to directly link the building with an array of solar panels. That investment would have been too high. It's too expensive. The upfront investment, you get it paid back, of course, over the years, but it was too much. So what we did was to enter a contract with a local utility who essentially were offering a deal to install solar panels for free. So they would invest in some solar panels. We provided the land, and we benefit also over the years through reduced electricity prices. So this array of, I think it's about 5 hectares of solar panels produces renewable energy that it's more or less equivalent to 40 to 50% of the total campus. Which means that in fact it produces more energy that Future Seeds building alone uses, but it's not being fed specifically into Future Seeds building, but it's contributing to the whole campus. In March this year, the building was officially inaugurated by the President of Colombia. It was a big event, also with many representatives from the CGIAR participating and representatives from national research institutions, Agrosavia, IGA, Humboldt, and so on. And on that occasion, Christian Samper, who is on the board, announced a 70 million donation from the Bezos Earth Fund and Jeff Bezos contributing to Future Seeds. So funnily, surprisingly, at the end, once we had built the building, we got the money. The funding, and actually that funding will not only be used to pay back the investment that CGIAR made from its reserves. That is actually only a very minor contribution that's going to be, but at the same time, the money will be used to support a research program in climate mitigation through the appropriate use of forage grasses that are covering up to 17 million hectares in South America. There's a big opportunity for an invention point to help mitigating climate change using these forages, which are being conserved in the Genebank. And part of the funds will also be used to establish some scholarships for students to come to Future Seeds to do their thesis in collaboration with different universities. So I'm going to take you now through a brief virtual tour through the building. In this area covers all the facilities, the laboratories for seed conservation, which are, let me see, yeah, which are located next to the seed vaults, to the cold rooms. So this upper level basically includes everything that has to do with seed conservation, plus this area as well. This is the area where the seed viability lab is located, and the area where we germinate bean seeds, which is quite large because bean seeds are large, and we have plastic trays with sand that's being used for germinating seeds. The herbarium is here. Down here is an office of the Colombian Phytosanitary Authority. It's ICA. They are integrated here. They're very important, of course, for everything that has to do with germplasm shipments. This is the area for in vitro conservation of the cassava collection, which also includes an area for cryopreservation. Now, this module here is dedicated to the germplasm health lab. It's a much better facility than we had previously, much more space and very appropriately designed around different types of pathogens. And down here is what's called the digital gene bank. So essentially the area that focuses on genomics and in the future, perhaps also adding phenomic data to the collections. These are the office areas. There's a meeting room as well. And this central area is this shared area for staff where staff from different areas, in vitro, germplasm health, seed conservation, digital gene bank meet. It's also an area for visitors to interact with visitors. And here's an open area, an atrium that can actually be used for different events. And I'm going to show you a photo later on. And we also incorporated into this building a circuit for visitors with these museographic elements exhibitions. Now, some photos from these different areas, just to give you a feeling of how things look like inside. This is the seed conservation area in the upper left. It's the area where threshing of pods from beans and tropical legumes, forage legumes takes place. At the lower left is the seed cleaning area. And on the right, upper right, you see the biggest drying room, and down at the lower right, the biggest cold room. And just as a side note, we use the opportunity to incorporate different measures to implement tracking, inventory tracking using RFID tags. So there are, on the left side, you can see here, there are these antennas that are being used to detect RFID tagged bags of seeds, and it detects the direction of the movement, whether they're being taken out from the cold room or being put back into the cold room. All this will be done automatically and uploaded automatically to the Green Global Community Edition database. Here's the in vitro, sorry, the seed viability lab in the upper left. Lower left is the herbarium. Upper right is just the outside walk towards the herbarium, and at the lower right you can see a view from the ramp at the back of the building towards the brachiaria feed collection and the greenhouses that also are being operated by the gene bank. In vitro conservation area, upper left, you can see the area where subcultivation, where propagation takes place, and then several photos from the incubation rooms, including the lower left photo. That's the area where we receive and conserve the safety duplicate of sweet potato coming from SIP. Germplasm Health Lab, some office space and various spaces dedicated to different types of pathogens. So in the lower right, you can see several smaller lab sections, and each one is dedicated to different type of processes like virus ELISA detection and fungal or diagnosis of fungal diseases using microscopes. And finally here, the digital gene bank area basically consists of, in the upper right, DNA extraction laboratory, and the lower right is a big open office area for visitors visiting sabbatical scientists, etc. In the upper left, you can see actually that's the event of the opening of the gene bank. There's a nice area there where we can hold meetings. It's an open, fresh area. It's very, very pleasant. And the lower left, you can see some forage demonstration plots right next behind the digital gene bank building. And I mentioned before, we included some museographic elements, some exhibitions for outside visitors. These are being designed together with Parque Explora in Medellin, the science park I mentioned before. They are really, really good in terms of designing exhibitions, science exhibition for the general public. We're still working on refining some of these elements and adding more topics such as domestication, use of genetic resources for different types of cuisines, and so on. There will be a little bit more added to the already existing exhibitions. Now, briefly mentioning, and this is very brief because we haven't started, unfortunately, moving the collection. That's a big task. We elaborated a very detailed plan, and everything has been delayed because of delays in commissioning the building. That's one of the lessons learned I'm going to mention in the next slides. But basically, we are about to move the bean and forages collections later this year, but the cassava collection will have to wait until early next year. Now, to finish off, experiences and lessons learned, costs. One of the big positive elements really is that the gene bank was built without any cost overrun, which is very unusual for these kind of buildings and these kind of constructions. That's because really that we had a lot of time dedicated to planning, to monitoring expenses, and also the exchange rate helped a lot because the dollar strengthened during the period of construction, and most of the costs incurred were in Colombian pesos. So that was a big contribution as well. In terms of how much more did the building cost because of particularly the LEED certification, we raised this topic with the architects, and they elaborated an estimate, and they estimated a more or less 10 to 15% additional costs because of building materials. But these costs should be amortized to some degree at least by an approximately 20% reduced electricity and water bill costs over the time span of the use of the building. Beyond that, and it's not really not really many additional costs. $25,000 for these green building consultants that I mentioned before in a different slide, and the certification itself will cost about $5,000. So that's not a big contribution. On the other hand, what I also already see is that some of the building features and the canopy, this high yellow roof, that will essentially help to save energy and water, but it will entail some higher maintenance costs because just to get up there, to clean everything and to repair leaks or anything is just very complex because of the safety regulations of staff working at great heights. So there's probably some additional costs. Part of the funds from the Bezos Earth funds will be used actually to contribute to the upkeep and maintenance of the building for that reason. And certain consumables and equipment that we are going to purchase in the future could be more costly. For example, we only can use fridges with the highest energy efficiency levels, or we cannot use certain pipes for the irrigation system, for the viability testing area of beans that are made of certain types of plastic, for example. We have to use certain types of plastic, and that sometimes adds some additional costs. In terms of staff time, a lot of staff time is required. A lot of staff time is required to help design the building, and then during the commissioning phase as well. I mean, I myself, I spent a lot of time, 6 staff from the Genebank and also 2 staff from the biotechnology unit, plus Joe Tome, the leader of the research area. We all contributed a lot of time to basically design the building. There's a lot of thought that went into that. Of course, everyone in Genebank is going to contribute, moving the collections and the laboratories. And the challenge really was with all the competing priorities and also emergencies to keep things going. In addition, of course, to just continuing to run normal Genebank operations, we had a financial audit, a technical audit, then we had the COVID lockdowns, and we had even in 2021 campus closure due to public unrest in Cali and the area. All these required emergency responses just to keep the collections alive, particularly the cassava collection. We were basically for 1.5 years, we were in emergency mode in parallel to building or overseeing the construction of the building. Also, we are in the process of developing the business plan for the long-term partnership agreement with the Crop Trust for the bean and forages collection, which had to be done in parallel as well, and all the challenges that some of you may be aware about in relation to the one CGIAR restructuring process also had to be done or be dealt with in parallel. In terms of delays, there are always delays in these kind of constructions, but our main naivety and unrealistic estimates was how long it would take to commission the building. We originally estimated a few months, and it's already more than a year and we're still not done. It's just a reality when you build a building like that, not everything works right off the gate. You need to test, you need to adjust, you need to still open some holes in the wall to fix things here and there, and this just takes time. So we are about 1 year behind schedule in terms of moving the collections. We have moved the laboratories, the DNA lab and the germplasm health lab, but not yet the collections. And the supply chain constraints also contributed further to exacerbate the delays. So having this delay, the biggest challenges have been, of course, we said we had to suspend the distribution of germplasm, but now we need to even further extend the suspension until early next year, which is unfortunate, but there's just no other way around. And we actually had already prepared to move the cassava collection to the new building by preparing an extra copy of all the 6,000 accessions, to leave 1 copy behind, take 1 copy to the new building, and run both collections in parallel for half a year, just to make sure that everything is right and it's okay before we discontinue the current building and just focus on the new building in terms of conservation. And now we have run out of space in the current facility because of that extra copy, which is a big challenge. Another area, lessons learned, experiences, is publicity. There has been a lot of publicity about this new Genebank building, the inauguration in international and national media. I participated in some YouTube talk shows in the channel of the Ministry of Agriculture and some radio talk shows. And as a result, we have to really be careful to manage expectations, because now we are getting quite a number of requests from individuals in Colombia in particular for seeds. And one of the challenges is also for our communication department to be clear that the Genebank is not, the main role of the Genebank is not necessarily to distribute large number of seeds for particular varieties or cultivars. This is really the role of seed systems, but to distribute starter seeds for particular purposes. And that's a communication issue that we need to work on. We have seen a 4- to 5-fold increase in visitors compared to the old building, and actually the number of visitors is going to increase further later this year and early next year, which is taking a lot of staff time. So what we're also doing is to work on an outreach and science education plan and plan for managing external visitors to be prepared to actually be able to receive so many external visitors over time. So let me finish here. It has been a long journey. It has been with lots of ups and downs, but at the end we ended up really in a very, very beautiful position with a new beautiful building. It's a pleasure to work in that building. The spaces, it just feels good. It's really, if you're in that space, it feels fantastic to be able to work there. And it's a gene bank that not only focuses on conservation and distribution of germplasm, but also on innovation in terms of conservation processes, methodologies, and also adding value to the collections themselves, and engage with the public in general to raise the societal awareness about the importance of genetic resources, and also contribute really to training the next generation of genetic resource scientists with universities. I mean, we're not an educational institution, but we are definitely a place where students can do lots of research and their thesis. So just to let you know who contributed to all of this long journey, down there you can see Daniel is still here, of course. Daniel De Boek, the former Genebank manager, he didn't move out of Cali, which is fantastic. So we can still draw on his expertise. In the middle is Guillermo, the main architect leading the design of the building. Gloria helped us translate between the requirements coming from the science side and the architects. Joe Tome, the leader of the organizational unit under which the Genebank is placed, and others in the Genebank and the biotechnology unit contributed particularly to the design. Marcela Santaella contributed a lot now during the commissioning phase, working very closely with the maintenance unit. Luis Guillermo, Gerardo Gallego, Monica Erickson, Roswell, Maritza, Monica, they all put their heads together and contributed to the design a lot and reviewing design. And now during the commissioning phase as well, Lina Hill, she was hired as an architect who oversaw the construction here on site. And Camilo and Leonardo are from the maintenance unit who have been working day and night really to get things right. And it hasn't been easy, but we are getting there. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for that wonderful tour, and a big applaud from all of us that are listening to you today with the efforts. I mean, it's amazing. We don't get the sense of all the stuff that you have done, but we can kind of feel it from your presentation of everything that had to go on for you to be able to do this. A few notes in the chat. If you look down below at the chat, we have shared 3 things. It's the Leadership, Energy, and Environmental Design Standard. That was the last thing that was shared. Before that, we shared the Living Building Challenge and the rating system that Peter had to go through to be able to get this building into some form of accreditation. And as he expressed, they're looking for the platinum level, which is the highest level that a building can aspire to have. So in the chat, you'll be able to see those 3 links, and please have a look if that's something that interests you. We do have a series of questions. I think I'll just jump around. Some of them are related. Peter, from Nora Castañeda. If you could start over again today, what steps in the redesign would be avoided? In other words, has there been anything in there that you thought, yeah, we should have dropped this, and then this is not as important? Is there anything in the design that you can think of that could have been changed or avoided or did not turn out as you thought?
I think one of the biggest challenges was communication. Communication among architects, ourselves, and these 2 advisory consultants or companies who were advising and then checking for feasibility of certification, and also then the technical designers, which is another group who needs to work with architects to implement all the needed interventions to comply with standards and to comply with our requirements. So there's a multi-party communication, and it didn't always work as much as we would have wanted. And I think instigating some sort of mechanism just to ensure that everyone is on the same page at every time would have avoided some delays and some frictions. That's one thing. The other thing, perhaps, it's not easy to right size such a facility. So you need to be very realistic of course, of the budget, but also what do you really need and how much do you want to grow? And there was a lot of back and forth in terms of how much more, how much less, or how much can we afford to add in terms of spacing. And And actually that that question also intersects with measures taking in terms of how you conserve your germplasm. As an example, in the case of beans, we had a certain space requirement based on currently conserved number of seed bags. During the construction, during COVID lockdown, and because we were all sitting at home, we went through a very detailed process in terms of streamlining how we regenerate and how we multiply and what's the most original sample and so on. That hadn't been really sorted out to a degree where all the flows of all the workflows in terms of seed lots had been fully established. We did that. And when we went back, we went through all the bags and discarded quite a number of extra lots that had been historically conserved, but were not really fitting into that scheme. And then suddenly we had less germplasm. But we were not taking that into account in the design. We were taking into account whatever was in 2015, 16, being conserved in terms of number of seed bags in the cold room. So there's an interaction between how you adjust workflows and how the gene bank should be designed. And that's a bit complex sometimes. So just two thoughts.
Yeah, wonderful, thanks. So again, from Nora, two-part question regarding national gene banks. The first is, what can you recommend to national gene banks that feel inspired by this new and big endeavor? What would be the first step, for example? Where do they even start? Where do national gene banks even start? If they are thinking of an economical or environmental building, where would they start with that?
I mean, I think it's almost impossible to retrofit an existing building to an LED standard, frankly, because it requires so many interventions that start from certain materials you can't use and that may have been used. So I think in terms of LED certification, it's for new building. I wouldn't try to suggest that this is doable for an existing building. But the easiest intervention really is renewable energy, I think. That's already being done. I mean, we're already thinking about it collectively, right? Hooking it up to renewable energy resource, but then also ensuring safety of supply. No? If you just the sun doesn't shine in the night, no. So you need to balance renewable energy supply with energy safety. But I mean, LED design is really, I would only go for that for a new building, not adjusting existing building.
Right. Okay. So the second part of that is, how can national institutions like gene banks, NARS, and universities benefit and collaborate with the new CGIAR gene bank? Are there any areas of priority that you see where you want to, now that you have this infrastructure and you have this beautiful building, that you would want to collaborate with NARS and gene banks?
Yeah, no. I think basically the answer is whatever are the priorities of national gene banks, because I mean we can offer a collaboration in how to handle seed quality management, regeneration. We have a very good agronomy team, and then all the digital component, genomics we are working on, the germplasm health lab, the diagnostic tests. Most of them are moving towards molecular tests, for example, now. We actually, I mean, this year and next year, we have joined forces with CIMMYT to organize 2 workshops for NARS and national gene banks in Latin America, in the region. This year, we are going to focus on genetic characterization of collection and gap analysis. And next year, we're going to focus on next year's meeting will be in Future Seeds. This year meeting is in CIMMYT. But next year, we're going to focus on whatever the community prioritizes for capacity building. So we are completely open to address whatever capacity building requirements are in the community. One of the areas probably also that we could offer is how to implement Green Global Community Edition, because our team we have quite a strong team in that area, and they are further developing this Green Global Community Edition database with the Crop Trust and adding more functionality. That's another area. But whatever is, we will do a ranking of priorities and design next year's workshop according to these priorities.
Yeah, with the user in mind. Yeah.
Exactly. No, it's not for us, it's for them.
Right. So there's a question from Caleb from Jordan, and he says, we're passing through the same steps towards building the national seed bank in Jordan, and they also have it in a separate building. And he wishes to benefit from your experience, and at the same time wants to ask, where do you think are the best funding sources for equipment that they need to put in the associated facilities? So they're building currently from local funds, but they need money for equipment. So do you have any advice for Mr. Caleb from Jordan about where to go about fundraising for the equipment?
Oh, I mean, fundraising has been a headache for the reasons I outlined. Where to get money for equipment? I mean,
they have funds for the infrastructure, and I'm sure you must have seen this. They have the funds for the infrastructure. They just don't have the funds for the equipment and all the other.
I mean, I would try places like United Arab Emirates and in those areas because of where you're located, and I wish I had a good idea, but I don't. I mean, the specific. I think funding for equipment should be less challenging than infrastructure. That's the good thing. No, infrastructure is the big thing. Equipment is not so challenging, but yeah. Sorry, I just don't have any good idea that I can draw out of a head in terms of funding.
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Can you advise, next question, can you advise on how to ensure power supply 24/7 without relying on highly contaminating generators? What other alternatives to the solar panels were considered during the process of the building?
No, I mean, we have some emergency generators. I mean, we need to rely on the utility net here. There's no way around. But we have some emergency generators, but they are using gas as opposed to diesel. That was one. It's again one of the several points collected to contribute to the LED certification. But beyond that, I mean, I think you still need some sort of fossil fuel based generator as the ultimate backup. Right. Because I mean, batteries are not where they should be to supply electricity for days in a row for a Genebank. There's no way around. But you could minimize environmental footprint by using gas, as we have done as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So from Sharada, from the Crop Trust, are crops grown under those solar arrays that you saw? Agrovoltaic?
I don't think so. No, it's just grass, from what I know.
Maybe some clover, some shaded clover there.
Well, perhaps it's some Arachis that was sown there. I need to check.
That would be interesting. We have another question from Andari. I wonder where the existing germplasm is stored during the rebuilding of the CIAT Genebank. Could you please explain more about this, and how long does it take to make all the rooms in the Genebank fully operable after the building is finished?
So the second question, it takes a year, really. I mean, if you want to do something similar, don't plan for less than a year of getting everything fully operational. Where are the collections stored? Still in the current building. They're still being held there until we are able to move. And moving the collection, one of the other big things is we actually created a small tablet-based app to prepare an inventory of germplasm that is going to be moved from here to there, to ensure that we don't lose anything or misplace anything. The inventory includes, of course, the identification of the seed bags and also the location from where they are extracted and where they are being put. So essentially a little application for moving a Genebank collection that we built that just to ensure that everything goes okay.
Right. Second part to his question is there a cryopreservation collection at CIAT?
Not, I mean, there is in the biotech unit. It's a collection that was assembled over many years during the development of the protocol, but it's not part of the Genebank because in the Genebank we first need to go through a cycle of rejuvenation of the whole collection whole cassava collection hasn't been rejuvenated for 30 or 40 years. And we need to eliminate pathogens and screen for genetic redundancy. And after that, we start cryopreserving using that protocol that was developed over many years and which is very efficient, actually.
And we did see in your map that you do have a cryopreservation room there. So that's in the works. Okay.
Yeah.
So a question from Kian, for economic benefits, how long will it be before you get returns on your investments? Any profits compared to the previous building? So a little bit about the economics of it. Do you intend to get any profits back or recuperate profits?
I mean, the main motivation really was being environmentally sustainable, because we always talk about environmental sustainability, genetic resources, agrobiodiversity, and a gene bank can be a big polluter if not built according to certain standards. No, so that was really the biggest motivation, and also reputational and creating a message, no, for the general public. But in terms of return on investment, I mean, I mentioned these like 10 to 15% increased construction costs, but then about 20%, that's the estimate, reduction in electricity and water consumption. So it depends on how many years you want to amortize that. I haven't done the calculation myself, but I guess it will eventually amortize itself. Not sure how far out, how many decades out, but I think over 40 years, it's probably a zero-sum game or slight saving, but ignoring the environmental benefit, really. That's the big thing.
Okay. Also a two-part question from two different people. The first is, what mechanism you will be using for moving germplasm from the old building to the new building to make it safely, so it's a safe move? And then once the old building is empty, are there any plans for using it? Second
question, it will likely be demolished because it's expensive to maintain an empty building that has no obvious use. First question, in the case of the seed collections, we are probably going either to hire some refrigerated trucks, or we're just going to use very large styrofoam boxes to keep the seed bags cold. It takes 3 minutes to get seeds from one building to the other, so the transport is not far. It's not a big deal. So in the case of the seed collections, it's not really a big deal. In the case of cassava collection, this has to be handled very carefully. We absolutely have to avoid the introduction of any contaminants, aphids, and so on. That would be disaster. So there we will have multiple steps of packaging in vitro tubes into plastic boxes, sealing the plastic boxes, putting them into large plastic bags, sealing the plastic bags, and then carefully transporting them to the new building, and then going in reverse as we unpackage the tubes in the new facility. So that has to be very careful. Contamination is a big risk. And that's the reason why we're going to continue to conserve a copy of the entire collection in the old building for half a year, just to be sure that things have gone right. Because unfortunately, we don't have a field collection of cassava to go back to in case something goes wrong. We have copies in the greenhouse to do so, but we don't have a field collection.
Okay. From Sarah, we have a question. Thank you, Peter, for your presentation. What are your ideas on handling the increase in non-research requests? Maybe providing educational material and or collaborating with others in the seed systems who could play a part, or other novel ideas that you may have.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big, at the moment, we are aware that there are opportunities and there are probably demands that we need to meet, and we haven't yet really a full strategy. I mean, we will get, I think, actually overall in the new Genebank initiative, we can work much more together with seed system players in terms of producing seeds for a subset of materials that are in high demand, whether it comes from breeding programs or whether it comes from gene banks. And the know-how of producing clean seeds is something that can be used. And I think we should think about collaboration between, greater collaboration between breeding programs and the gene banks to work in that area. We're already receiving some requests, no, to, for example, store some rice seeds from the rice program. So we actually, one of the cold rooms has a big area to receive safety duplicates from other gene banks. And these areas can also be used for these type of purposes. At campus, we have several cold rooms of breeding programs to store seeds. And I think we can consolidate all that into a single site, in that big cold room where all this area is to store seeds for others, essentially as a service.
Right. Okay, thank you. We have 2 more questions, if that's okay. Sure. Okay. In your experience, and this comes, I think, a question from many national gene banks, what are the advantages of having the large colder rooms versus having freezers?
Oh, we couldn't work with freezers. I mean, in our case, we couldn't work with freezers because we would need hundreds of freezers probably. It's just impossible. But working with freezers has the advantage you have no single point of failure. If you have one big room, you have a single point of failure. And if there's a problem, you have a problem for all accessions. So if you have limited number of accessions, using freezers is actually quite good, I think, because you can have some extra freezers in case one freezer breaks down, you just move everything to the next one and that's it. So your only risk is electricity supply, but not, you don't have a single point of failure in a big, in the form of a big cold room. And just a case in point, all these cold rooms, the drying rooms, they have of course backup equipment. So everything is doubled. So each cold room has 2 chillers. If one fails, the other one starts working, and the same with the desiccation equipment as well.
Okay. We've had 1 more, but both of them are interesting, actually. One on a technical and another on architectural. So the technical first. What is your advice to move the seed conserved at currently at 4 degrees Celsius? So it's in active storage or maybe even temporary storage without having been dried just yet. And they want to move it to -20. What steps are better to follow? It says not to lose the seed viability.
No, but I mean, if you want to store them for the long term, you need to dry them appropriately. So you need to get them back to room temperature and dry them in your drying room, and then repackage them ideally in an airtight container before you move them to -20. Otherwise, yeah. I mean, it's safer to dry first, I think.
Exactly. So the 15-15, most standards say 15-15. You need to dry it at 15 degrees Celsius, 15% relative humidity. Get that moisture content down to be between 3 and 7% before you put into -20. Otherwise, it would be catastrophic for the viability.
Exactly.
So that needs to be handled. The last one, an architectural question from Christelle. Will CIAT or the architects of Future Seed produce resources on this amazing design and construction process to be used as a guideline for other gene?
I'm pretty sure we are all open to share the designs. There's no problem with that. We didn't expect to receive such a request, but if we receive such a request, I'm absolutely sure that our institution and the architects will be more than keen to share all the design features, because everyone here is very proud of the building. So there's no doubt about that.
Yes. Okay. With that, I think we're done. Peter, thank you very much on behalf of all of us for presenting.
Thank you. It was nice to link up.
Beautiful presentation about a beautiful building. So thank you so much for putting in the time and being with us today. To all our participants, thank you very much for joining us. We hope to see you in December, where we'll have another interesting grow talk. So until then, please stay safe and we'll see you. Bye-bye.